Perfect. So, Ashir, can you hear me okay? Is it all fine?
All seems to be working well.
Okay.
I'll plenty of people joining, so we'll just be starting now. So if you take over, Shivam.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So, hi guys, my name is Shivam. I'm a medical student at Nottingham University. Today is all about how to prepare for the UCAT. So, the whole idea of today is just to give you some advice from our team at MedicMind to just give you an understanding. How should you be preparing for the UCAT? What are you actually expecting from this exam? What are some tips and tricks that you can start with in terms of starting these practice questions? And really, it's about starting to develop your skills very, very slowly, because you still have got a bit of time till that UCAT exam, which is between kind of July, September time. But now you really should be starting to do as much practice as possible. And that's the whole idea of today, is to get people started, how to really understand what is this whole UCAT exam all about, and what makes it challenging. Perfect. So just to give you an idea, hopefully everyone really understands the timeline of the application, but the UCAT exam is between the 26th of July and the 29th of September. So that's when you'll be sitting the UCAT exam. Now, we always recommend that you don't really sit the UCAT exam really late. So, leaving it to the 20th of September, because that is just postponing the inevitable, and can be quite stressful for a lot of students. So I'd recommend, looking at the kind of August dates, just a date that is suitable in terms of not clashing with any exams or kind of mock exams that you have at school as well. Remember, then you've got your personal statement to be working towards as well. And then the BMAT exam, you can either sit in September or November. And once all of that's finished, you've sent your application off, the interviews will then start very soon. That will be November all the way to kind of, could even be until April the year after. So you can see that there's lots and lots of hurdles to overcome, and that's what makes applying to study medicine quite challenging in that sense, because there are lots of hurdles. But the whole point of this is to really assess yourself, and to see if you can actually manage your time, manage all these things going on at the same time, even whilst you're studying at school as well. So there's lots of things to do. And in terms of the BMAT, so the BMAT is the other aptitude test. So the UCAT is an entrance exam that requires no scientific knowledge at all. The BMAT exam is required from 8 of the UK medical schools, and that is testing some scientific knowledge. So that will be biology, chemistry, physics, and maths. So if I just go on to the next slide. So in terms of what you know about UCAT, so again, if you do have your kind of phone out, if you just go to menti.com and you just type in the code at the top here, you'll be able to kind of interact with this. So this is just going to be helpful for everyone, really. So if you either want to kind of just drop something in the Zoom chat, or if you can just do it on Menti, that would be really useful. The whole point of this is to really just share experiences, share knowledge of what you already know on the UCAT. So what do you know about the UCAT already? So it's an incredibly time pressured. I'm really glad that someone's wrote that. So it's a very time pressured exam. Why? What makes the UCAT exam so time pressured? Well, the reason for that is because there are lots and lots of questions to answer, but these questions, you can either, if you spent, for example, 2-3 minutes on these questions, actually you realize, oh, they're actually quite easy. But the reason why the UCAT exam is so difficult is because you have to answer relatively kind of, I wouldn't say easy, but relatively easy questions in such a short period of time. And that's what makes the UCAT exam very difficult. And that's why you need to practice so much, and you need to know these tips and tricks surrounding the UCAT exam. There are 5 different subsections. So what are those 5 different subsections? Well, you've got verbal reasoning, you've got decision making, you've got abstract reasoning, quantitative reasoning, and then finally the SJT. So this is fantastic. So some universities place more emphasis on the SJT. So what is the SJT? The SJT is the situational judgment test, or a situational judgment task. So that's the last section of the entire UCAT exam. And what it's really assessing is, how can you How can you approach different situations and understand things about patient safety and being a safe medical student or being a safe doctor or dentist? That's what the SJT is about. And some universities, if you score, actually most universities, if you score band 4, which is the lowest band for the SJT, they will automatically reject your application. So the SJT is quite an important part of the UCAT exam as well. Yes, it's a medical admissions test for dentistry and for medical school. Again, a really fantastic point here. You need to try not to use the calculator, and effectively what you basically need to do is use a lot of mental math skills. If you know, lots of students try and overuse the calculator, and that is a real disadvantage because the calculator in the UCAT exam is on your screen and it's very fiddly to use. So if you can start getting into the habit of using good mental math skills, that'll be really useful. Yes, I would say it's an IQ test. It kind of is and isn't an IQ test. One thing that I like to tell all my students and tell, you know, I really take this on board actually, everyone, is try to enjoy your preparation for the UCAT exam. The more you enjoy this and the more you take it as a, it's kind of like a fun problem solving exam or fun problem solving task, the more you'll enjoy it. At the beginning, when I started my preparation for the UCAT, I really struggled because I didn't find it enjoyable and I wasn't very happy at the beginning because it was something so new to me. But what I did is mentally, I kind of said to myself, you know, these are just, it's just kind of like a little problem solving puzzle. It's really a puzzle at the end of the day. If you look at it in a positive way, that can really, really help in your application. Another fantastic point made by Mariam is that there's no negative scoring or marking. So that's really important. And it's important because a big aspect of the UCAT exam is being able to answer questions very, very quickly and efficiently. So some questions you actually have to estimate the answer, or what I like to say, guesstimate the answer. So you're kind of guessing, half estimating, and coming to a conclusion very, very quickly. So that means don't leave anything blank, okay? Don't leave anything blank at all. Perfect. So is there anything else that I've missed? You can only sit the test once a year. That's fantastic. I'm also going to plug my laptop onto charge so it doesn't die. You can sit the test once a year. That's really, really important. Just make sure that everyone is aware of that, because if you didn't score very, very well in the UCAT, you can't sit it again for that year. You'd actually have to resit it the year after. So you can see that there is a lot of emphasis on this UCAT exam, and preparation for it should be exactly the same as, for example, preparing for a GCSE or a A-level exam. You need to prepare. You can't just rock up to a chemistry A-level exam without doing any preparation. You're going to get nowhere. So it's exactly the same with this UCAT. Do you need to do the BMAT exam? Only a few universities require you to sit the BMAT exam. The UCAT exam, however, is basically a requirement for all students who want to study medicine, because the 90 to 95% of all the medical schools in the UK require the UCAT exam as the entrance exam. So Joe, you've said that, can I sit the UCAT in year 11 and use the score for the applications? No, you can't do that. You actually have to sit it in year 12. It's a really good idea, but actually no, you have to sit it in year 12, because the UCAT exam that you sit for that year is what counts towards your application. So if you're not applying to study medicine in year 11, you can't sit that UCAT exam then. Can you resit the BMAT? No, you can't. It's exactly the same with the UCAT exam. It's only a once a year sitting. It's a really, really good questions, guys. But this is the whole point of today, is to answer all these questions that people have. Okay, so the UCAT exam, again, this picture here, I don't know why the quality is so poor, but this gives you an idea of exactly what the exam is going to look like in terms of your screen. So it's not very fancy. You've got, this is an example of the verbal reasoning section. So you've got the text on the left-hand side, and then you've got the question here on the right-hand side. And then you've got A, B, C, D, and again, it's multiple choice. In terms of answering some of these questions here on the right-hand side, I think I've gone through most of them, but when is the UCAT exam? The UCAT exam is, you know, all this information is on the official UCAT website, so definitely have another look, but it's between July and September. There's 5 different sections to the UCAT exam, And how do you revise? How do you revise for this UCAT exam? Well, this is where kind of this is where you have to start going through practice questions and really understanding the types of questions that you're going to be asked. Towards the end of today, I'll show you lots of fantastic links that we have for lots of resources that we provide at MedicMind. We have more than 4,000 kind of practice questions that you can go through, lots of e-videos and video tutorials. So that's going to be really useful in terms of preparation. And in terms of when do you revise, we always recommend students start their preparation kind of 6 to 8 weeks before their exam day. So really, anyone sitting the UCAT exam this year should really be starting their revision, starting their practice now, really. Which is easier, the UCAT or the BMAT exam? That's like saying, you know, what's harder, the chemistry or physics or maths exam. So, you know, they're both tricky exams, but they're testing different skills. So the UCAT exam is more problem solving. There's 5 different sections. The BMAT exam is more scientific knowledge based. So it's testing your GCSE standard maths, chemistry, biology, physics. And then also there's an essay part to the question as well with the BMAT exam. Is it multiple choice? The UCAT exam is completely multiple choice. In terms of the scoring, that's something I'll just talk about now. So the scoring is between 300 and 900 for each section. So it's a very weird way of scoring. It's not a percentage, so you can't get 99% or 66% on the UCAT exam. You get a score between 300 and 900 for each section. Apart from the SJT section. So basically you're going to get a score from 4 sections and between 300 and 900. So for example, verbal reasoning, you could get 630, quantitative reasoning, 700. That gives you an idea of kind of how the scoring works. Now, every single year and every single time you sit the exam, okay, so say for example, I sat the exam and one of my friends sat the exam the day after. We're going to be getting different questions. Okay, we're not going to be getting the same questions, and that's why they score it in this way, because each question that they kind of upload onto the system will have a different sense of difficulty. So every year, the score that you get doesn't directly correlate to a percentage. So what do I mean by that? Well, say for example, let's say we're doing this verbal reasoning section, and say for example, I got 80% of the questions correct. I might get 750 for that section in terms of my score. My friend could have got maybe 60% on all the questions that they answered right, yet they might score exactly the same as me. So they might score 750, or they might even score higher. So that's why there's no kind of percentage. It's this score between 300 and 900 that you get, and it's something you shouldn't get too worked on. You shouldn't really be focusing on the score too much right at the beginning when you're starting your preparation. The average score for each section, and this changes slightly year on year, is around 630 to 650. So that gives you an idea of roughly the average score that students get. So that's the minimum or kind of average that you should be aiming for. So someone said, but are the questions on the paper the same for every year? No, they're not. They're going to vary significantly, and even during different sittings. So people taking the exam at different times during the for example, if I took it on the 30th of July and someone took it in September, we're going to be getting different questions. So don't worry about that. In terms of the style of questions each year are very, very similar. So they're going to be asking you similar types of questions. So for example, in this verbal reasoning section, which is a comprehension section, they're going to be asking you questions about the passage, the piece of writing. It's going to be about comprehension. So yes, the text will vary every single time, but actually the style of answering the question is going to be very, very similar. So for example, with a question like this, again, I can't see what the even I can't read this text here because for some reason the quality is really, really poor here. But in terms of maybe a question like this, one of the things I would do at the beginning is maybe have a quick scan of the answers, just so that I'm aware of what this topic is all about. So I can kind of read here, there's something about nylon, there's something about polyester, there's something about rope. So I know that this is something to do with materials and textiles, or something to do with that. So at least in my head, I know the topic roughly. And then I'm going to read the passage very, very quickly, but I'm going to do it in a way where I'm scanning the text. I'm scanning the text very, very quickly. So my top tip for verbal reasoning when you're starting out and doing some practice questions is don't read everything very, very slowly. You need to be scanning the text and looking for keywords. So for example, there might be a word called material here, and I know that this text is about material, so I need to start linking words from the text to the answers. And so again, with the UCAT exam, it is something that requires, the reason why we need to start preparing very, very early is because it's something that you've never ever done before. It's very different from GCSEs, it's very different from A levels, and that's why it requires a lot of preparation, because it is going to be new to you. So don't be overwhelmed at the beginning, because it is something very unique and different. So don't worry about that. It's just about starting and just appreciating the questions. So, and again, which universities use it? It's basically 90 to 95% of all the medical schools. There's only 8 medical schools in the UK that require you to sit the BMAT exam. The rest require the UCAT exam. So it's very, very important in your application. So again, I'm just going to put this on the screen if anyone wants to take any pictures, or just to really be aware of these dates. They're very, very important. So on the 2nd of June, the UCAT registration opens. And the UCAT bursary and application opens as well. So this is where the UCAT registration officially opens. And then the UCAT bookings open on the 28th of June. So that's where you can start booking your UCAT exam. And the testing period, this is the most important part, is between 26th of July and the 29th of September. Okay, and then again, year on year, it's exactly the same. The 15th of October is your UCAS application deadline. So you have to have submitted your personal statement by then as well. So again, another very important screen. It's, again, it can be quite overwhelming looking at this straight away. So I'm going to really break it down. So how long is this UCAT exam? The UCAT exam is 2 hours. It's 2 hours, yet amazingly, if you look at this number here, you have to answer 233 questions. 233. That's a lot of questions to answer in 2 hours, but you have to break it down. So with verbal reasoning, you've got 22 minutes and you've got 44 questions to answer. So to begin with, this might seem quite overwhelming. It's around 30 seconds to answer each question. However, with verbal reasoning, I'm going to break this down. There's 44 questions, but actually there's 11 passages. So there's 11 passages that you need to read and 4 questions per passage. So actually, instead of breaking it down mentally in terms of 30 seconds per question, it's actually 2 minutes per kind of section or reading passage. Okay, so there's not a lot of time. Of course, there isn't a lot, but you need to just appreciate that actually you need to start breaking things down. So for example, with quantitative reasoning, we can see here that actually we've got more than 30 seconds to answer the question. And in terms of going through this UCAT exam, don't be scared of really challenging, difficult questions. So the best students, the students that do the best in the UCAT exam, are the ones where when they can recognize a very, very, very challenging question, they actually sometimes just skip to the next question straight away, or they guesstimate the answer within a few seconds. This is a really important tip for everyone, because as you can imagine, if you have a very, very challenging question in front of you and you take, for example, in verbal reasoning, you take 3, 4, 5 minutes to answer this kind of section or question, you're going to be ruining the rest of the subtest, really. So, you know, for quantitative reasoning, if you spent 4 minutes on a question, you're completely jeopardizing your chance of doing well for the other questions because you've wasted time. So don't be scared of skipping questions. That's a really important tip. don't be scared about doing that. And we have lots and lots of kind of resources at MedicMind in terms of giving you advice about how to guesstimate and how to answer questions really, really efficiently. So again, I'll come on to that just in a second. But I would highly recommend really understanding these tips and tricks because they're going to be useful in the UCAT exam. So again, this is sometimes this can be a bit overwhelming seeing kind of the timing of each section. But this is actually really important because now you're starting to appreciate that you don't have a lot of time in this UCAT exam. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you need to start being efficient in the way that you're answering questions. That's basically the real take-home point of today is about preparation. It's about practice. It's about practicing questions and appreciating that it is going to be very time limited. So you need to be efficient in the way that you're practicing as well. Brilliant. So in terms of some kind of 6 key tips at this stage, so if you're starting your preparation for the UCAT exam, these are kind of 6 tips that I'd say to kind of go for at the beginning. Just starting off with number 1, probably the most important part, and something that we've talked about today in a bit of detail, is just getting to grips with the test format. So I've given you kind of a few slides in terms of the timing. And that's really important because you just need to understand that this test is going to be very different from any GCSE exam or SATs exam or A-level exam that you've ever sat in your life. Tackle each section on its own. So what do we mean by that? Well, when you have your, I think it's 22 minutes for verbal reasoning. So you have your 22 minutes for verbal reasoning. As soon as the time finishes, you'll be going straight on to the next section. Now, if you didn't do very well in the verbal reasoning section, or you didn't think that you did very well, you have to forget about it and you have to move on to the next section because each section is independent of one another. And you can do very, very, very well in one section, and that can really boost your entire score up. Okay, so tackle each section on its own. Really important tip. And I don't know if anyone is aware of this as well, but when you get to the interview stage, interviews are done in something called an MMI. So that's multiple mini interviews. That's what it stands for. And multiple mini interviews means that you're going around to different stations, maybe 6 to 10 stations, and you're basically having a mini interview at each station. Now, the same principle applies with this UCAT exam in the sense that each station is independent of one another. So what that means is that you're going to be scored independently on each station, and then your scores will be added up together. So that's a real plus for a lot of people, because what that means is that if a section or if something didn't go too well, that doesn't matter because you're moving on to the next one. Understand how the timing works. Again, a very important part. That's kind of linking in with the test format. And again, try and use the UCAT official practice tests. Now, this is all on the official UCAT website, so that's www.ucat.co.uk, I believe. And again, we've got lots and lots of practice questions on the MedicMind website as well, so definitely check that out. Carrying out effective UCAT preparation. So what I mean by this is start your preparation now. Start your preparation as early as possible. The earlier you prepare, the better. And practice the exam in a library setting. So this is a really actually fantastic point here, because you can practice as much as you want at home, but when you sit the UCAT exam, you'll be sitting the UCAT exam in a test center. So the same test center that you sit your driving theory exam. So just being aware of the environment, the setting, the computer that you're going to use, the keyboard that's going to be there in front of you, and the mouse and everything, just appreciating that. That's why kind of practicing in the library on similar computers will be really useful. Okay, so again, I don't want to kind of delve into this in too much detail in terms of exactly how long to prepare, how long does it take to prepare for the UCAT exam. We always recommend 2 to 3 months before sitting the UCAT exam itself. So, you know, the vigorous, intense practice should really be going on 2 to 4 weeks before you actually sit the UCAT exam. But the starting as early as possible is going to be really, really useful. That's a big take-home point from today is really just starting. And in terms of starting, what do I mean by just starting this preparation? Well, starting the preparation will be appreciating the different sections of the UCAT exam that we've just gone through. Okay, it's understanding what are the different types of questions that they're going to be asking me. How does the comprehension section work in verbal reasoning? Is it going to be a really long passage? Is it going to be a short passage? Appreciation is really important at the beginning in terms of preparation. Brilliant. So in terms of verbal reasoning, again, I'm just going through the different sections now and just giving some advice in terms of people who are just starting their preparation, in terms of going through different sections. So for verbal reasoning, one of the things that I would say at the beginning, this is my kind of number one tip, is using our keyword technique. And the keyword technique is something that we have lots of YouTube videos about on our YouTube channel. We have lots of practice questions about. So the keyword technique is really understanding. It's actually something that I just mentioned earlier with that example that we had, is have a look at the answers first and identify what are the key words in the answers and the answer, the 4 different answers that they're giving to you, and then try and link those key words to the text. So it's actually identifying really important keywords. So for example, a keyword might be about football, or it might be about the football final in the answer text. Now you have to try and link football with something in the text. So they might not, football and football might not be going straight together, but they might talk about something to do with slide tackling or kicking a ball. And this is how you should really be working out the verbal reasoning section. It's linking keywords together. Another important point with verbal reasoning is identify extreme language. This is one of my favorite kind of tips in terms of verbal reasoning. So what do I mean by extreme language? Can someone write just in the chat, what do I mean by extreme language? What do you think that means? Fantastic. So I've got lots of people kind of messaging here. It's exaggerated language. So it's things like the most, or the least, or the biggest, or the smallest. Basically, like Labour just mentioned there, all the words that really end in est. So this is really fantastic, because in the verbal reasoning section, they love to put in these words that use extreme language. So they like to put in words that say this is the biggest building in the world, or the smallest building in the world. Now, if you can identify these extreme languages, that's going to really help you in terms of answering the question, because generally these extreme languages link with the answers all the time. Okay, so just be aware of this. This is really advice in terms of being aware of these superlatives, the type of language that they're going to be used in the verbal reasoning section. So if you can identify words like the smallest or the biggest, that might be a bit of a clue in terms of where the answer is lying here. Now, don't miss out a TFCT. What does that stand for? That stands for true, false, or can't tell. Now, some questions in the verbal reasoning, they will have 3 answers. And those 3 answers will be true, this statement is true, B, this statement is false, or C, I can't tell, or you wouldn't be able to tell. Now, don't miss out on these questions. These are actually questions that you can do actually in 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So these are the questions that you really need to focus on in terms of answering them very quickly. So that's true, false, can't tell. So don't miss out on these questions, but at the same time, the true, false, can't tell, you have to do the true, false, can't tell questions very quickly, because if I just go back actually to that example that we had, where is it gone? There we go. Again, don't worry about reading the text, even I can't read it properly. But here we have 4 different answers. We've got A, B, C, or D. So this question is going to be a lot harder than a true, false, can't tell question, because a true, false, can't tell, there's only 3 answers to begin with. So you're giving yourself a 33% chance of getting it right. And also with this type of question here with 4 answers, there's a bit more reading to it. So we need to actually read each of the answers. So we can see that we want to be spending more time and more effort on these questions rather than the true, false, can't tell, because these questions are going to be slightly harder or trickier in terms of timing. So if I just go back to this, okay, brilliant. And then what's another tip for verbal reasoning? Well, another tip that I would say is to look at the conclusion first for author questions. So again, some people might not be understanding the language that I'm using right now, but again, even if you're jotting some of these points down, or you're just mentally taking this in, when you start doing the practice questions, you'll start appreciating what I'm talking about. So look at the conclusion first for author questions. So for example, one of the questions might be asking you about the author's opinion or the author's idea. What do you think is the author's main point that they're trying to get across from this text? Now, most of the time, the answer to this question is actually in the conclusion or at the end of the passage. So a lot of students, they're trying to scan the passage. They're trying to see, oh, what does the author, what are the main author kind of points that they're trying to make from this text? They're scanning around, they're scanning through the passage, and they can't seem to find it. And then at the end, they realize, oh my God, it's right at the end of the text. So generally, look at the conclusion of the passage in terms of the author's opinion and the author's final remarks on the text. Again, another point here is that you can guess some of the questions. Don't be scared of guessing. There's very limited time on the UCAT exam, so actually being able to guesstimate answers, so estimating and guessing answers, is going to be really, really useful in the entire UCAT exam, but in particular also the verbal reasoning section. Okay, so again, another point here about watch out for negative questions too. So what do I mean by negative questions? Can someone answer that in the chat? What do I mean by negative questions? Even just have a guess. What do you think negative questions might be? Yeah, so some good points here. So something that cannot be concluded from the passage, or asking whether something is not. So a question might be phrased like, which of the statements are, for example, not correct, or which of the sentences are not mentioned. So these are negative questions because they're saying what isn't mentioned or what is not mentioned. And that can be quite confusing because sometimes you've basically got double negatives going on in your mind. So that's something that people get stuck on all the time. So just start appreciating that some of the questions might actually say to you which of these statements are not in the text. Okay, so always look out for that. If every time I see the word "not" in the answer or the question, sorry, I immediately draw attention to that, and I really mentally just say to myself, okay, what is not going to be? What am I not looking for? And again, it's something that students get wrong all the time. So just bear that in mind. If I knew that earlier on, that would have definitely helped me. Don't spend too long checking. Okay, so this is another tip for the entire UCAT exam, is actually once you finish the question, you're really never going to go back to it ever again because of a limited time. So once you finish the question, you're happy with the answer, move on to the next one. Yes, in the UCAT exam, you are able to go back to previous questions. That's absolutely fine, but there's no point, because if you go back to a previous question, the most likely thing that you're going to do is actually reread the question again, and that's just going to waste a lot of time. Again, make sure that you're practicing in the library when you can, and using kind of computers and kind of a school computer, for example. And make sure you're doing all of this on a screen, because remember, the UCAT exam is going to be on a screen. It's an online exam. And finally, one of the points that I do want to mention about today is, someone's actually just asked a question about can you switch between different sections of the UCAT exam? No, you can't do that. So once you finish a section, so for example, verbal reasoning, and you move on to the next section, let's say quantitative reasoning, you can't go back to any of the questions in verbal reasoning. Okay. So another aspect that makes the UCAT exam quite tricky is that they sometimes include questions that are almost impossible to answer in the given time. So this is really important because you need to start identifying these questions that are very, very challenging or too tricky to answer in 30 seconds to 1 minute. And again, like I said before, the best candidates are the ones that can recognize these really, really challenging questions and just move on to the next one. Okay, because you're going to save yourself time and actually you're going to be gaining more marks from going through these other questions that are going to be slightly easier. And in terms of, so I think a few people have asked, do you move on to the next section or does it move on for you? It moves on for you. So when the time has finished, it will automatically move you on to the next section. So let's just talk a bit about decision making. So decision making itself is it's the most problem solving topic in the UCAT exam. So what I mean by problem solving is decision making. It really is in the name. You have to make decisions. You need to, another way of putting it is you need to come to conclusions in the UCAT exam. So what are the different types of questions that can be asked in decision making? Well, one of the first types of questions is how to use Venn diagrams for syllogisms. So what do I mean by syllogisms? Well, syllogisms are questions that are going through things like, for example, Ben has red socks and James has a pink top, and what color shoes does Jamie have? Okay, so it's basically those types of questions where you get given some information about different people, and then you have to kind of work out something from the text. It's quite difficult to explain, and again, it's something that you'll come across in the decision-making section. But one of the key bits of advice that I'd recommend is actually starting to create Venn diagrams for yourself. So that means create some circles, and the reason why Venn diagrams are useful are because you can start linking pieces of information together. Okay, and again, this is something that just appreciating these things like syllogisms and Venn diagrams at this stage is just going to be useful in terms of when you start your preparation. The whole point of today is not to understand everything in a lot of depth. It's to give you more breadth. It's to give you some appreciation of the types of questions that can come up. Learn about spatial equations and algebra. Anyone who struggles with algebra, this might be a nice time to maybe go back and revisit some GCSE algebra and appreciate what algebra even means. For example, they won't directly have algebraic questions like what is 3x plus 6 minus 9 equals something. They will have they might have shapes replacing numbers, basically. So they might have an arrow plus a diamond equals a square. Okay, and then you have to work out what does each shape correspond to. Another tip for the UCAT exam is not to over flag. So can anyone in the comment section just kind of write what does flagging a question mean? Does anyone know what flagging a question means? So what does flagging a question mean? So you've got a question and you click on the flag button. What does that mean? Brilliant. So it's about coming back to it later. So what it is that you can flag a question. If you saw a question and you weren't too sure and you were kind of umming and ahhing whether to actually answer the question right now or move on to the next one, you can press the flag, and when you finish the entire section, you can come back to those flagged questions. Flagging is really useful for questions that you just have no idea about and you want to move on to the next one. But again, students do it all the time. They over flag. So every other question they might be flagging, they flag. And then when you finish the section, you've now got an overwhelming amount of questions that you've now flagged up. Again, I'm going to really reiterate this again and again and again. There's no negative marking. There's no negative marking in this UCAT exam, so guessing is okay. You're not going to be marked down for guessing. A really good question. How many questions should you flag per section? I'd say maybe think about maximum 5 questions to flag per section. That seems a reasonable amount, because as you can imagine, you finished the section and you're coming back to a few flagged questions. Around 5 seems like a reasonable amount. So I'd recommend, you know, somewhere between 1 and 5. Amazing. And this is a lovely example actually of a spatial equation. So this is a bit of algebra, isn't it? But they might give you this algebra in a different way and using shapes. Okay, so quantitative reasoning section. So quantitative reasoning section is all about mental maths. It's being able to answer these questions and just really appreciate some mental maths. So I'd highly recommend going through the basic multiplication times tables and just making sure that you know your times tables, maybe up to 12 times 12, for example, off the top of your head. There's another piece of advice that I was going to mention as well. Oh yeah, I've just remembered. Another piece of advice for quantitative reasoning actually is try and understand what fractions are in as a decimal point. So for example, I know that 1/2 is 0.5. I know that a quarter is 0.25, etc., etc. So make sure that you know things like 1/5, 1/6, 1/7, 1/8, 1/9. That's it, because sometimes you don't need to use the calculator. Then you can actually work it out straight away in your head. What other types of questions can come up in quantitative reasoning? You've got questions like interest rates and tax questions. So tax questions can be quite difficult if you've never done a tax question, or actually if you don't know anything about tax. So obviously they don't teach you anything about tax at school. So I'll quickly run through this very, very briefly. So the way that tax works, if anyone doesn't really understand, is that for a certain amount of money, you get taxed on. So, for example, between £0 and £12,000, you might get taxed 0%. So you don't get taxed on your first £12,000. Then between 12,000 and let's say 20,000, you might get taxed 20%. The money in between 12,000 and 20,000. So how much money is that? Well, that's £8,000. That can be taxed at 20%. Then let's say between 20,000 and 50,000 pounds, you might be taxed 40%. So actually, if let's say someone earned 30,000 pounds, they're not going to be taxed 40% of all their money. They're going to be taxed in brackets. Okay, so just bear that in mind. The big take-home point from that is you're going to be taxed in brackets. So your first £12,000 won't be taxed. Okay, so you can put that money to the side. Between 12,000 and 20,000, you might be taxed 20%. So can someone tell me actually, so what between 12,000 and 20,000 pounds, if you're taxed 20%, how much money is going towards the tax? So between 12,000 and 20,000, so that's 8,000 pounds. Yeah, perfect. So £1,600. So far we've got £1,600 that's gone to tax. So, and now we remember this person's earned £30,000. So between 20,000 and 50,000 pounds, you get taxed 40%, let's say. So can someone work that out now? So if you earned £30,000, according to this method that I've just used in terms of taxation, how much tax am I going to be paying? So I'll just put it in the chat. So £30,000 between 0 and 12,000, there's 0 tax. Between 12,000 and 20,000, there's 20% tax. And between 20,000 and 50,000, there's 40% tax. Okay, so I've just put it in the chat. Just have a go, try and work that out. So the question, Joe, is if you earned £30,000, how much tax are you going to be paying? So remember, the person has earned £30,000. How much tax are they going to be paying? And I have put in the chat the different tax brackets. So it's not going to be £12,000. Let's go through this. Let's go through this really, really slowly, actually. So someone has earned £30,000. On the screen, I have put the different tax brackets. So just refer to those tax brackets that I've put in. So someone's earned £30,000. The first £12,000 that they've earned is not taxed, so they're not paying any tax on that. The next £8,000 that they earn, so this is between 12,000 and 20,000, so that's £8,000, is going to be taxed 20%. So what's 20% of 8,000? That's 1,600. So far we've paid £1,600 towards tax. Remember, we've earned £30,000, so that means that the next tax bracket that I'm in is going to be the 40% tax bracket. That's what we're talking about. So now I've got £10,000 left. £10,000. So this £10,000 now is in the 40% tax bracket. So what's 40% of 10,000? That is going to be £4,000. So 4,000 plus 1,600 is 5,600. So that is the answer to that question. So 5,600. So can you see, guys, actually, this is it's quite a difficult tax questions, and interest rate. It can actually be quite challenging because it's not as straightforward as it first seems. So I really hope that everyone understands that. If anyone doesn't understand that, I can go through it one more time. Okay, so okay, I'll just repeat that one more time. So what I want you to do initially is, if you go to the chat, just go to where I've put the different tax brackets. Okay, so just go to that first just to appreciate what are the different tax brackets. So if you earn £30,000, you are going to be in a particular tax bracket, but that's not how you think about it. What you have to think about is, where is each section of money contributing towards. So again, let's go through this. So between £0 and £12,000, you don't get taxed on that money. So that means that I have £30,000 that I've earned. The first £12,000 is zero tax. So it's £12,000. So far, I've contributed £0 so far. The next bit of money is between 12,000 and 20,000. So that's £8,000. £8,000 is going to be taxed at 20%. So we worked out that 20% of 8,000 is 1,600. So far, now I've contributed £1,600, but I've only dealt with £20,000 worth of money. How much money have I got left over? Well, I've got £10,000 left over. Which tax bracket is that final £10,000 going to be in? Well, it's going to be, it has to be in the 40% tax bracket, because we've dealt with 0% tax. We've dealt with 20%. Now we've got money that is going to be in the 40% tax bracket. And 40% of 10,000, as people worked out, was 4,000. So it would be £4,000 now. How much tax have we also paid? 1,600, and then we combine the two together. So I'll actually ask one more question, so just to see if everyone has really understood that. If I earned £18,000, how much tax am I going to pay? So if I earn £18,000, how much tax am I going to pay? Amazing. 1,200. That's absolutely right. Perfect. And then the final question, just because I really want to make sure everyone really understands this, because it's a really, really important question to know in quantitative reasoning. Now, if I earned £40,000, how much tax am I going to pay? 40,000. Yeah, perfect. That would be 9,600. Why is it 9,600? Well, remember, between 12,000 and 20,000 pounds, that figure of 1,600 pounds of tax is going, it's gone towards tax there. How much money have we got left over? Well, we'll have 20,000 pounds left over, and 40% of 20,000 is 8,000. So 8,000 plus 1,600. Okay. So Mahin, these types of questions, they do get a lot harder. How can they get a lot harder? Well, they can get a lot harder when you have, instead of the 3 tax brackets that I've put in, they could have 5 or 6 or 7 tax brackets. And that's where things start to get tricky, because remember, you've only got around 1 minute per question. And if you need to kind of go through these tax brackets and work things out quite quickly, that can be quite tricky, can't it? So that's where these kind of tax questions can get even harder in that sense. Do you get paper to do your working out on? So you do and you don't. So you don't actually get physical pen and paper, so with a pencil and paper. What you do get, though, is a whiteboard. So in the UCAT exam, you get given a whiteboard and a pen, and you can use that to work things out. Perfect. Hopefully I've answered any questions that people have. Again, on this right-hand side of the screen, we've got an example of the UCAT calculator. Now, this UCAT calculator is very fiddly and ridiculous to use. You need to use your mouse. You need to click on the numbers. You can't use the numbers on the keyboard, which again is it's very, very, it's a big faff to use, basically. So what I would recommend for quantitative reasoning, for the entire UCAT section, try not to use the calculator. In terms of answering this question about M plus, N minus, and MRC, that's actually relating to the numbers that are stored onto the calculator. Now, again, we have a lot of tutorials actually at MedicMind about what all the different functions of the calculator mean and how to actually use the memory function on the calculator. I'm not going to go through this simply because I don't have a calculator up in front of me, and it's just so much easier to show you. But what MRC, M minus, and M plus are to do with it are the memory function of the calculator. Okay, so let's go on to abstract reasoning. Abstract reasoning. So let's think about the word abstract reasoning. So abstract reasoning is about what does abstract actually mean? So abstract is something that is maybe, I like to think of words like unusual. It's a bit different. It's something that isn't quite straightforward. And that kind of sums up the section of abstract reasoning. It's about shapes and patterns. As you can see here for number 6, that these are the types of questions that you're going to get. You're going to get different shapes and patterns, and you will then have to relate a certain shape and decide, is it part of set A's pattern or set B's pattern? So abstract reasoning for basically everyone at the beginning is the most challenging section of the UCAT exam. The reason for that is because it's something you've never done before. It's very unique. It's very weird and wacky. But again, think of it in a positive way. It's like it's problem solving at the end of the day. So we go through lots of different methods of approaching abstract reasoning questions. Now, one of the things that we do go through are different triggers and patterns to help. So here on the screen, I don't know if you can see this okay, but these are ways of approaching questions. We're looking at things like the shape, the orientation, the color, the position of the shapes, the number of shapes, and the size of the shapes. Okay. Again, remember, this session is about appreciating the types of questions. So if you can appreciate that these are 6 points that might help you in abstract reasoning, that's a really good start. So look at the shape itself. Is it a triangle, a square, a circle? Look at the orientation of the shape. Are all the shapes for some reason in the top right hand corner, or are they all Are they all on the side of the screen? Nothing's in the center. So that's what we mean by orientation. Color. Are all the shapes black? Are all the shapes white? Are all the shapes are some shapes going black, white, for example? The position, again, think about the position of the shape itself. Are all the shapes, have they got right angles? Have they got, are they all positioned in a certain way facing 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock? Okay. The number of shapes, are there 10 shapes per box? Are there 12 shapes per box? And the size of the shape, are they all very big shapes? Are there, let's say, 4 big shapes to every to 1 small shape? Okay, so again, this is very abstract reasoning is really difficult to explain in a short amount of time, but that's okay, because what I've just given to you there are some triggers, are some ideas to think about when approaching abstract reasoning. Okay, they're ways of when you start going through abstract reasoning questions, you'll start to realize that there are certain triggers that you go towards and patterns that you can recognize. Okay, so again, with abstract reasoning, towards the end of this session, I will just put some more kind of links to actually going through abstract reasoning questions as well, so that could be useful. Situational judgment. So can someone please tell me what situational judgment is all about? Just try and type just in the Zoom chat, what do you think situational judgment is all about? Why is it even included? So can someone tell me what is situational judgment, and why are we tested on situational judgment? Why is it even included in the UCAT exam? So there's some really good answers coming through to begin with. So it's really fantastic. So it's about professionalism. It's about decision making. It's about ethics. So the reason why they've included the situational judgment part of the test in the UCAT exam is because when you become doctors, you need to act in an ethical way. You need to be professional in the way that you're acting. So the reason why they've included the SJT is to actually measure, are you actually able to understand when a patient is in danger? Or are you able to understand that it would be wrong to carry out a procedure when you are kind of incapable, haven't practiced that procedure before? Can you understand that if a patient has capacity or doesn't have capacity, you can and cannot do certain things? So the whole point of the SJT is to really just test whether you have these kind of ethical patterns and ethical, really, if you're an ethical person and if you have that sense of professionalism. So the SJT, the reason why it can be quite difficult is because, again, you haven't done anything like this before. But if you are a sensible human being, if you are someone that appreciates patient safety and someone that realizes that doctors should be acting in a professional way and that medical students should also be acting in a certain way, then actually the SJT will not be a problem at all. And again, when you go through and practice these questions, I think the #1 tip that I would give is always think about patient safety. If a patient in any question is being put at risk, or is being lied to, or is being hurt by someone else, patient safety is going to be key. That is going to be the #1 kind of thing on your list, to be honest. So always think about patient safety. And again, Labour has put a really fantastic point. It's determining the most appropriate or least appropriate action. So sometimes we need to think about what is the most appropriate thing to do in a situation like this. So let me give an example. If you were, let's say, taking blood from a patient, and you were basically taking blood and you couldn't seem to get the blood, and you put the needle, you changed the needle when you tried to take blood again, that didn't work, and you've tried the 3rd time, the 4th time, and now you're really, really embarrassed. But on the 4th time, you feel like you might have got the blood, and the patient asks you, did you manage to get the blood? And you say to them, yes, I did, but actually you didn't. is that going to be appropriate, or is that going to be not appropriate? That's what you have to start thinking about. You need to start thinking about, you know, is lying to patients appropriate in any way? No, it isn't. So a really good question that a student asked me last week is it ever appropriate to ever lie to a patient about anything, even if it's to kind of protect them in certain ways? Now, again, this is all going to be, again, it relates to situational judgment. It's all going to be situation based. So I told that student that actually, generally, you should never lie. Well, you shouldn't lie to patients at all. If you ever think about or have thought about lying to a patient to maybe protect them or to help someone else, then there's obviously an underlying reason behind that. And you need to try and focus on that reason. So, for example, you might lie to a patient. For example, I think they said that if a dementia patient is speaking to you and is really confused and agitated, you might need to lie to them about something. Is that right or wrong? Well, again, that's going to be situational based. You know, you might not, instead of lying to them, you might actually speak to them in more simple language and explain things in a simpler way rather than directly lying to them. So it was a really good question that the student asked, actually. So just be aware that situational judgment is about every single situation is independent of one another, and you need to take things independently. Every situation is going to be different, but make sure that you're acting in a responsible way, in a professional way. You're thinking about the ethics. So again, last question of the day. Can someone tell me what are those 4 key pillars of medical ethics? Does anyone know about the key pillars of medical ethics that you need to think about? Brilliant. So I think most people have got that there. So we've got the four key pillars are autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. So autonomy, what does autonomy mean? So can someone just put that in the answer chat? What does autonomy mean? Yeah. So autonomy is the patient's right to make their own decisions. Patients have the right to make their own decisions. So doctors can inform patients of things. We can give them advice. We can tell them that actually, you know, these are the 4 options that you have available to them. It might be, one might be surgery, one might be drug treatment, one might be doing nothing at all. So we can give them this information to them. But at the end of the day, the patient has the right to make decisions by themselves and for the best. For, you know, it might not even be the right decision that you think, but actually at the end of the day, the patient can make their own decision. So that's exactly right. So autonomy is a patient's ability to make their own decision. Beneficence, again, beneficence is a really easy one to remember because beneficence is quite similar to benefit. So beneficence, benefit, and also it BE at the beginning links with best interest as well. So I always think about beneficence as 3 things: beneficence, best interest, and benefit the patient. So you're doing something to benefit the patient in the best way. So that's a really nice way. Anyone struggling to remember beneficence, try and think about that. So beneficence is about doing something for the best interest of the patient, doing something to benefit the patient. Then we've got non-maleficence. Now, non-maleficence means do no harm. So it's not harming the patient. So can someone think about how can beneficence and non-maleficence, how do they go hand in hand? So how do beneficence and non-maleficence go hand in hand? So how does beneficence and non-maleficence go hand in hand? So we've got beneficence benefiting the patient, and we've got non-maleficence not harming the patient. So yeah, you want to do good for them, you know. That's fantastic. So I think, is it Nikita, you made a really good point there. Every treatment has a risk to it. So even a simple blood test, there's going to be a risk to that blood test. And a nice way to think about it is every single drug that is ever prescribed in the entire world has some sort of side effect to it. So the whole point of medicine is trying to balance. We're trying to balance between the positives and the negatives of medicine. So if we give a medicine to a patient, something like chemotherapy or radiotherapy, there's so many risks to chemotherapy and radiotherapy. There are loads of things that harm patients. Patients can lose hair, patients can get very sick. But we do chemotherapy, we do radiotherapy because actually, as doctors, we realize that the benefits actually outweigh the negatives or the risks or the things that harm patients. So that's a really nice way to think about beneficence and non-maleficence is thinking about those two things. Fantastic. So I hope that's helped. Again, it has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour of everything. In terms of resources to go through, definitely have a look at the kind of MedicMind website. We have lots of free resources and practice questions. We have lots of different UCAT kind of guidance and advice. And again, another big thing is that students are constantly asking me all the time is about one-to-one tutoring, and that's something that MedicMind is all about. So anyone who is struggling on particular sections or wants to have someone like myself go through everything with you and teach you things, you can do some one-to-one tutoring. It could be a few hours. We have different packages as well. So just go to the MedicMind website. You can just kind of enter your details, and one of us can call you and speak to you about everything as well. And if that's something you're interested in, then definitely get in touch. Ashir, did you have anything did you have a link that you just wanted to put into the group chat in case anyone wanted to kind of have any tutoring or wanted to know a bit more information about it? If Ashir is still here. Apparently not. Perfect. So no worries. So what I would recommend doing is if you just go to the MedicMind website, we have lots of information there about one-to-one tutoring. So you can just click on the link there. And again, we can set up a WhatsApp group chat with yourself and us at MedicMind, and we can take it from there. If you wanted to have tutoring, if you wanted to have extra sessions, we can absolutely sort that out for you. But were there any other questions about anything else at all? Just feel free to drop a message in the Zoom chat, ask anything on Menti. I'll be more than happy to answer that for you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.